Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the next episode of the Mint Mob Podcast. Jason here, joined by my buddy Alex across the pond in Germany. We're going to jump into all of the usual things, but first, let's check in. Alex, how's things, man? How you doing?
Hey man, I'm doing good. Considering we have a pretty bad day for crypto and the economy in general. We have a pretty big trade war going on. I think I heard that people said that this is in the top four of the worst days for U.S. economy ever. I think one was like in 1980, 70, which is now is that the Black Monday? I think it is. Then we had one in 2008, obviously, and one in 2020. I don't know which one was meant in 2020, to be honest. Was it like the COVID pandemic? I don't know. But yeah, this one is supposed to be in the top four of the worst economic dumps we ever had. Yeah, how do you see all that?
I see it as opportunity. I mean, unless you feel like the world is going to stop spinning and, like people are going to stop building things and consuming things, it's just an opportunity to buy. I mean, like obviously, as I was saying off mic, like I was sitting here just lamenting the fact that I wish I had more cash to throw into the markets right now, just because, all of these shocks, both up and down, are temporary. In the long line of history, everything sort of smooths out. And so for me, I don't see it as a bad thing at all. I think it's perfectly acceptable to have markets that travel in both directions, because how else would I get good deals? So for me, it's just a good deal day. And I don't buy into all the negativity or the nonsense. And, I feel like people who aren't really set up for, a mindset of understanding that not every day is going to be a positive day, they don't need to be in the market. Because the truth is there are going to be ups and downs in any market that's worth being in. Otherwise, you're always going to be in a spot where you can never get a better entry point. And who doesn't want a better entry point if you're an investor, right? So for me, like, give me a better entry point, then man, I'm happy, especially if I got a little bit of money to throw at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we both agree that this is not like a regular market movement that we used to have every now and then. But yeah, it's obviously due to the tariffs from Trump, and we get new information all the time throughout the whole day. China is reacting, European Union is reacting, and markets keep reacting as well. So, yeah, what's like the newest stuff we got? Let's see. It looked like almost every country was ready to negotiate tariffs,
Hmm.
but right now it seems like all the countries do not want to play in Trump's game and react the way he wants them to react. For example, we have China who has like I think 34% in tariffs, like in like an increase. And I just read breaking news that President Trump cancels the press conference with Prime Minister Netanyahu from Israel after he flew in to negotiate a new tariff deal. So it looks like there won't be a quick agreement on that, because when I saw the markets dumping, I felt like, okay, let's just wait it out. I was also pretty pretty mad and disappointed that I had no chance to buy a lot more. But it looks like we might be moving within that range for some time now. What do you think? Will we see a quick relief rally, or will we stay at these levels for some time?
I think everyone should pull up the stock market chart, just the Dow Jones, pull up the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and then zoom out to 5 years, right? That's what you should do. And if you zoom out to 5 years, you'll see that the curve is going up, trending up all the way from sub 25,000 Dow Jones to where it is today at 38,000 Dow Jones. And you'll see a big hump in 2022 or end of 2021, beginning of 2022, where it went up to 36,000. And then at the end of the year, dropped down to 29,000. Guess what? That's about the same move as we're having right now. It's nothing new. It's nothing to get excited about. The only difference is the impetus, like what is causing it to happen. And if you just look at the markets on a long enough time frame, excuse me, time horizon, you'll see that these are just ups and downs. They're normal ups and downs. Now, what causes them might be abnormal or might be different, but you have to realize the more that a news organization or, the more the talking heads talk about what's happening, the less scary it becomes. It's just like anything. If you take anything terrifying and you just keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, after a while, it loses its ability to scare you because you've seen it so much, you've talked about it so much, you've looked at it 5 different ways, you've seen it from a few different angles. And so now the terror is gone. And that's where we're at right now. I mean, people don't realize like this administration took over in, the end of January, basically. January 21st, I think, is the inauguration day. So they got started, excuse me, or January 6th, whatever it was, January something. They got started mid to late January. And here it is. We're in April, I don't know, whatever today is, 6, 7, April 7th when we're recording this. So, I mean, in 3 months, basically, this administration has been extremely active, and they've been basically taking the tact that the U.S. is not going to subsidize countries anymore. And from a logical standpoint, it makes a lot of sense when a foreign country is charging you tariffs on your products, but you don't have tariffs on their products. It makes sense to retaliate monetarily to protect the jobs and the people within your borders. Now, you have to realize it's been the other way around for 30 plus years. The U.S. has just kind of sucked it up and, we've just sort of paid the price. And now everyone is having to adjust to a guy who is sticking to his guns and who is unwilling to basically say, we're not going to play second fiddle to you anymore, right? We want fair exchange. And if you're going to tariff us, we're going to tariff you. That's what's happening right now. The U.S. putting on tariffs is the new thing. Other countries have always had tariffs on the U.S. So this isn't, like some brand new idea. But ultimately, the way it plays out on a long enough time horizon is it brings jobs and opportunities back to the U.S. And yes, that might raise prices to a certain degree, but it also keeps the money that's spent inside the U.S. borders as opposed to outside the U.S. borders. And that's the attempt that's being made right now. Is it going to hurt? Yeah, it's going to hurt in the short run. Anything worthwhile requires pain in the short run, right? Like if you want to lose weight, guess what? You're not going to eat the cake. If you want to get big muscles, guess what? You're going to have to suffer in the gym, right? Like if you want to be in a good relationship, guess what? You're going to have to shut your mouth sometimes and listen to your partner when you really don't want to. Like all of the things that are worthwhile in the world demand a sacrifice. And it's amazing to me to watch so many people bitch and moan and whine and complain here in the U.S. when they've complained about the very things that this administration is trying to fix for many, many years, and also watched people on both sides of the aisle. This isn't a Republican Democrat thing. This is just a common sense thing. Go back and look at Obama. Go back and look at Bush. Go back and look at Clinton. Pick one. They have all said the same shit. It's just that this president is actually doing what he said he was going to do. So the only difference here is action, not rhetoric. So at the end of the day, it's going to subside. People are going to get used to what's happening. It's nothing to really panic over or, get all crazy about. It's just that it's going to take time for it to settle in and sink in and for people to come to the table and start negotiating new deals, new agreements. So at the highest level, everyone just needs to zoom out a little bit, look at the market over the 5-year, not the 5-minute mark, and then look at the curve. Everything's going to be all right. The world is not going to stop spinning. Countries are not going to stop trading with one another. People are not going to stop creating. People are going to not stop consuming. The world will continue on. The difference this time is the speed at which it's happening, and that scares the shit out of people, right? So I think that if we can just look at the track record of history and understand that when change is employed, it scares people. And when change is employed fast, which everybody claims to want to change fast, but nobody really does. When change is employed fast, it's very, very scary. It's the devil you know versus the devil you don't.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that the whole market is panicking. So many people want Trump to basically step away from the tariffs. And I think I read a quote from Trump today who said, "Don't be weak, don't be stupid, don't panic." And this is actually this pretty much aligns to what you just said about the current situation. But do you think? I mean, we've heard Trump um, talking about tariffs since he was basically elected, even before. Um, do you think this event or the event that is currently happening was predictable? I mean, we talked about people like Warren Buffett selling all the stocks and prefer sitting on cash right now. Do you think we could see all that coming?
Not really. I mean, I don't think we've ever had an administration that actually did what it said it was going to do. We really have not had that. I mean, this is the truth of politics. Most politicians want to preserve their income. Like, if you're a career politician, you want to keep your job, basically. You've built a lifestyle around it, right? The difference this time is that this is Trump's second term, so he can't be elected again, right? He can't run again. He has nothing to lose by going balls to the wall and trying to get some shit done. And the speed at which things are happening within his inner circle with the executive orders, which I'm not a big fan of, honestly. And there have been some executive orders he signed that I'm really not a fan of. I'm not a fan of doing that at all, really, unless and until or except in the accepting the fact that nothing is being done, right? So when we get to this place where you've got Biden or Trump or whomever sort of governing by executive order, what this is proving to you is that the system is locked and nothing is moving. And so to force movement, we've had executive orders signed on both sides of the aisle for the last, I don't know, ever how many presidencies. I'm not a fan of that, but in the case of needing to get movement started, I think it's necessary on some level. Now, I wish there was another way to do it. I wish people could come together and see sense, but that's just not the way it works, especially in politics when you have career politicians who basically are elected based on popularity, certainly not on performance. Because if you look at the performance of 99% of politicians, none of them do what they say. And in truth, a lot of them argue against what they say, especially like when you look at the Pelosi's and the Elizabeth Warrens and those types of people, the Mitch McConnells. These people, they basically insider trade. They have access to financial data that other people don't have. And this is just criminal, right? And they've been in politics for 30, 40 years. They've milked a paycheck from the people for 30, 40 years. They've made themselves multiple millionaires, from their trading activities on these $200,000 or $300,000 a year salaries that they have. That's not possible for the average person because the average person doesn't have access to these things. So, yeah, I mean, when you're a career politician and your way of life is basically threatened, you will do everything in your power to protect it and to defend it, even if that means telling lies about the other side and making up stories and whipping the masses into a frenzy and calling the stock market crash the worst one, blah, blah. It's all BS, man. It's just a bunch of smoke and mirrors and it's bread and circus for stupid people, right? Like if we go back to the Roman times, the whole bread and circus days, they had a word for people. They had a word for the masses, and the word for the masses that the Romans used was the capita sensae, which means those counted by head. And this is a classic example of where people in power are using those counted by head. In other words, those they don't give two shits about unless they're, like whipped into a frenzy to support them. They don't give two shits about you. They don't care about you. All they care about is their own agenda, and they're using these people to advance it, via protest, paid protests in some cases, and the nonsense that you see on the nightly news. So aside from that, right, if we just look at what's happening, the fact of the matter is that these policies can produce a better future for all, but they have to be allowed to work their way into the system. We have to allow people to come to the table, and we have to take our medicine in the short run. We have a sick patient here, one that is trillions of dollars in debt with no way out unless we start making some sacrifices. And that's hurtful. It harms people financially. It harms people physically and mentally when they start looking at how they participated in it. You have people who've attached their entire identities to benefits and to quote unquote working for government. And at the end of the day, when you get rid of these people in these programs and they've tied their identity to it, that hurts, right? That's very hurtful. So there's a lot of change happening in a very short period of time. And, politically, we've got these 30 and 40-year politicians who aren't used to doing anything other than collecting a check and enriching themselves. They need to be gone, And so what I'm looking for and what I'm hoping for is that we can get through this and stay in the fight long enough to see the other side, the benefits on the other side. And I just don't know if, the population has the will to do that. We've raised generations of weak people the world over, not just in the US, but the world over in the last few decades. So it's going to be interesting, man. How do you see it?
I think we're on the same page there. In my opinion, it's probably necessary that the United States bleeds right now in order to get a brighter future. But, when markets move heavily, especially when they move down, there is one person getting very active on X, and that's our good friend Peter Schiff. And Peter made a post addressing Michael Saylor, and he said, "Attention, Saylor, now that Bitcoin is below 80K, if you want to prevent it from crashing below your average cost of 68K, you had better back up the truck with borrowed money today and go all in." He got a comment that said, "Everything is down, mate, not just Bitcoin." And he replied, "But Bitcoin was sold as a safe haven, a store of value. If during market sell-offs it crashes more than other assets, what value does it offer investors?" What can we tell him?
well, what we can tell Peter Schiff is that, again, timelines matter. So if we look at the short-term timeline where Bitcoin went from, let's call it at the high, like 105 or 108,000 down to whatever it is today, 78. That's that's a big move. But he's neglecting the move from 15K to 80K, right? How many multiples did the stock market do when Bitcoin went from 15K to 80K? So again, we're just looking at timelines. Like you can cherry pick timelines all day long, but if you start from inception to now, Bitcoin is still ahead of the stock market, right? It's just there's no two ways about it. And all we can tell from Peter Schiff and his tweeting over the last, I guess, 3 to 5 years is that he's going to stick to his guns when it comes to his negative outlook on Bitcoin. He's going to continue to call it no value. He's going to continue to talk his book. He's going to continue to talk about gold. Gold is, I think, just over 3,000 US last time I looked, which I think was last night. And I mean, this is a very, very small move relative to everything else that's taken place with Bitcoin. Again, it's talking about timelines and cherry picking them. So if we want to cherry pick timelines, we can make anything look good or anything look bad. And that's really the game that's being played here. That's why I told everyone, zoom out 5 years and tell me what the play is. Even if you bought Bitcoin during the last run up at 60, or 58, whatever it got to, even if you bought Bitcoin at 60 and it's at 80 today, you're still up like more than 25%. That's insane. You can't say that about the stock market. And if you bought Bitcoin at the last peak at 19,000 and it's at 80,000 today, okay, well, you're still up 400%, So that's my argument. Look at the timeline, look at the entry points, and see what you got.
What I read a lot about is the often used term recession. Recession here, recession there. Everyone is talking about it. And Do you see us heading into recession, or do you think it's just like a short-term thing, as we just mentioned, and we will go through that very quick until everything gets brighter again?
I think we're going to see pullbacks in, well, I mean, we've already seen some pullbacks in like, major risk asset markets, but we're going to see pullbacks in things like housing markets in the near future. I think it has less to do with the broader market than it does with like millennials and homelanders, like the two most recent generations. I think it has less to do with anything other than them just not having any money and not really wanting to work. Like the girl that cuts my hair, or I went to the barber the other day, and the girl that was cutting my hair, she's like 20 years old, and I was like, I was just talking to her, shooting the shit. I was like, "What do you do, or what do you do for fun?" She's like, "Oh, nothing really." Well, what do you do outside the house? Oh, nothing really, not much. I just kind of sit around the house. Okay, you're getting married? Yeah, I'm gonna get married. Okay, what are you guys gonna do for a living situation? Oh, we don't know. We're just gonna kind of play it by ear. And like everyone who's in that Homelander generation, um, they don't really seem to have much ambition. They don't really seem to have much in the way of like a desire to produce. I think they see it as almost impossible for them in some ways. And of course, the parents that have raised these children have instilled in them this sort of take it easy, sit back and wait vibe, which really isn't beneficial, especially at that age when you have like your most productive years, your most productive decade is coming up. You've got the most energy. Even if you eat like shit and don't work out, like you still have the best version of yourself that's going to happen in that decade, right? So like when you look at those types of people, they are not going to be able to buy houses. And they, in a lot of cases, just like talking to this girl, she's not interested in buying a house, right? Especially if they can live in mom's basement or dad's basement. Or, like we were talking about earlier off mic, buy a camper van or an RV, like these types of situations, working at the barbershop or working at Starbucks or, working at the grocery store, for $14, $15, $16 an hour, like you're not going to be able to buy a house when the house is $400,000 unless you've spent, the majority of your young life saving money for a down payment. And of course, most people haven't. They've spent their younger years consuming and spending. So I think we're going to have a big shift. Like we've got the baby boomers going to retirement. They're going to want to sell businesses. They're going to want to sell second homes, second properties. So I think there's the potential for a real estate pullback unless in your area you're seeing a lot of business growth, which fortunately for us here in Arizona, specifically North Phoenix, like we've got this massive facility being built right down the road. It's called Taiwan Semiconductor Corp, and they are building a facility. Dude, I swear to God, it's like its own city, and it's only halfway built. This thing is freaking huge, and I'm not even sure how many thousands of jobs it's going to create. But right now, it started operating, and we're going to have more and more people moving into this area to work there. So real estate in this area is going to be fine because there's going to be a demand for homes, and there's going to be a source for good jobs. But if that's not your situation, I would expect real estate to pull back and, create an entry point for people who don't necessarily have down payments or lots of cash to spend.
When you talk about real estates, there was one thing coming to my mind. You probably see that Elon Musk keeps tweeting about declining birth rates in Western countries.
Yeah.
Do you think the population in Western countries can collapse and that being a threat to real estate markets as we suddenly have less people for many properties?
Let me see. Let me make sure I understand that. Say that one more time.
So if birth rates decline, usually the population decreases as well. Do you see that as a threat for real estate markets and prices not in the near future, obviously, but in like maybe 30, 40, 50 years from now? Because if you have less people in the population, but the same amount of properties, prices usually should go down.
True. Yeah, real estate is local. So if you think about real estate, whether you're factoring in population demographics, which are on the decline the world over, and I think largely because of increasing costs, people not wanting to have any kids or more than one kid. When you look at real estate, you always have to look at what's happening in the local area. So broadly, you could say that population decline is going to have a lessening demand on supply. Therefore, you should see prices come down. But again, if you have a high inflationary environment, which is what we've had for decades now, the same house continues to go up in nominal price terms, but not really in value. Like if I look at my house, we're getting ready to sell one of our rental properties. Okay, I bought it for roughly $200,000 7 years ago, and it'll sell for about $450,000. Okay, so why would that same house? It's the same sticks, it's the same bricks, it's the same stucco, right? Everything that basically constitutes the house is the same type of material. So why would it be more expensive? Well, the reason is the inputs, the cost to recreate it have gone up. Like the cost of 2x4s, the cost of stucco, the cost of brick, the cost of roofing, all of that stuff has doubled in price over the last few years. So it's not really that the cost of the house has gone up. It's the cost of all the inputs have gone up nominally in dollar terms because of inflation. So if we have a lessening demand on the existing supply, if they continue to push inflation into the system, you'll see the prices basically stay the same, right? And this is always their goal because most people hold their wealth in their house. So this is why inflation exists. They want you to be able to borrow against your house. They want you to be, basically right side up on your house. You don't want to be upside down, in terms of debt to worth. And the government in the US and in other countries have basically made it so that the price of your house would always go up with inflation. So could it pull back? Yeah, absolutely, it could. But again, you have to look locally when you're talking about prices that are going to impact you, and broadly when you're talking about generalizations. But broad real estate generalizations are generally not very useful, again, because so much local impacts the cost of a home. Like if you're in a good school system district, you want your kids to go to a great school. Those houses are going to be worth more than someone, on the wrong side of town that has a shitty school system. If you have services, gyms, big, huge parks near you, access to national forest or park, these properties are going to always be worth more because they're more desirable. So at the end of the day, it's just going to depend on your local situation, and you really want to pay very, very close attention to that. But I think the biggest thing the population decline is going to have an impact on is the major government's ability to pay benefits. We've got basically, the U.S. is considered a capitalist country, but the truth is all countries are some mix of socialism meeting capitalism. The question is to what degree. We've never had a pure capitalist economy in the U.S., and I don't know of a single country that really has, right off the top of my head. There's communities that have, but not really countries. So when we have declining population and we have this pyramid scheme of Social Security and SSI benefits and EBT and all these other programs that are meant to, give money to people or redistribute wealth, when you have fewer people paying into that system, then obviously the only direction that those benefits can go is down. So that's a huge concern. So the government obviously wants to create inflation to keep the nominal, cost of those benefits up so that they can distribute at least the same number of dollars. Now, whether those numbers of dollars buy the same amount of goods is directly tied to the inflation rate. And so I think that's going to be the biggest impact, not real estate, not stocks, not 401ks. I mean, you have to realize the average person isn't involved in investing or buying any of these things outside of either living in the house or just giving a portion of their paycheck to their 401k for, someone else to invest. They're not actively managing their money. They're not actively, in and out of real estate. They're just going wherever they see opportunity and wherever they want to be. So for the small amount of people who are investing, who are building businesses, it can definitely impact rental portfolios. It'll impact where people want to buy. but it won't impact the average person that much unless and until we start talking about benefits and government handouts and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you mentioned the biggest problem of population decrease, it's pretty similar here actually. I don't know if you guys have some sort of or how your pension works, what people get when they get old. But here it basically works like you have to pay a certain amount of money every month with your paycheck for your pension once you get old. And actually, like the younger generation pays for the older ones, but obviously as birth rates decline, less younger people come into the world of like working and paying, but we get a lot of old people at the same time, and this is where the system collapses obviously. And it's pretty similar to what you described happening in the United States, if the population decreases. And this is actually a pretty big problem that we will have to face around the whole world or in many countries, but it looks like nobody's really paying attention right now.
Yeah, I think older people are paying attention. I know because, like this is the thing that's so difficult, right? Like and this is the beauty of freedom and responsibility, because like when you put yourself in any situation, whatever the situation is, if you're free to choose into it and then you're responsible for the choices that you make, then you have to abide by whatever outcome you get, be it positive or negative, right? The problem with government programs and all the government bullshit is it's forced upon you at the point of a gun, right? If you don't want to pay taxes, guess what? Somebody's going to show up at your door with a gun ultimately and force you to either pay your bill or put you in a cage. That's basically the way it works, right? So all government programs, all government sort of legalities are all enforced at the point of a gun. In the US, in Canada, in Europe, it doesn't really matter. It's all comes down to government has all the guns and they're going to come for you if you refuse to play by their rules, and especially if you do it publicly for a long period of time, right? So when you think about how this stuff plays out and what it's required of the people who have created these systems, look at someone who's in their 60s, 70s, 80s today. And they were sold a bill of goods in the 70s that if they contributed X amount of dollars to the 401k, or if they were forced to pay X amount of dollars out of every paycheck into Social Security, which is our retirement program here, or our sort of retirement benefit here, that money would be given back to them many times over in retirement. Okay. So now you're coming in and you're saying, okay, well, guess what? We don't have enough population to fleece, to tax, to pay these benefits that we promised you. Because guess what? The government is shit with money. They've overspent, they've wasted, they've defrauded people, and they've enriched themselves, basically. And so guess what, guys? We don't have the money for you now. Okay, now how would you feel if you were one of these people who's getting ready to or is already receiving these benefits? You would feel it's owed to you, right? It's owed to me. This is what was told that would happen, okay? And they didn't have a choice in this. This was just taken out of their paycheck. Government created a law, and then someone stroked their signature at the bottom of the law and made it law, and now every state had to comply, and everyone had to be pulled, into this sort of Social Security system, if you will, in this particular example. Okay, well, now you've got an administration that's coming in and saying, hey, we're going to try to save money. We're going to try to cut fraud so we can still afford to pay these benefits, right? And people are like, well, I'm in the situation where I'm receiving my benefits or soon to receive my benefits. Are you going to cut my benefits? And it creates all this fear because, again, they were told that this would happen, that it would happen like clockwork, that they would be paid and that they would always get their money. And now government is looking very, very shaky to them, And this is the part where it's like, okay, well, had we allowed them to choose rather than forced it upon them, we could say, okay, well, this is your responsibility because you chose in. But we didn't give them a choice. We just forced them into the system. And so now it's like, okay, well, am I going to get paid? You forced me into this system. and they expect a positive result because it's backed by government, right? And so all the psychology in and around, these measures to cut and to save create fear around all the people who are relying on and who do rely on things like government pensions or social security payments or whatever benefits they're receiving, military or otherwise, right? And so how do you deal with that? It's very, very difficult. So the administration is trying to cut in other areas to ensure that those payments can still go out and actually increase them. That's the language that they're using. But the fear tactic right now is, oh, they're going to take your benefits, right? And everyone who feels that they're owed these benefits is going to rise up and protest, So it's really tough because, again, these people didn't have a choice. They were forced into this system by law. They couldn't opt out. They got their paycheck and the government got paid out of their paycheck before they did, whether it was income tax or SSI or whatever. And here we are. And they're wondering, hey, am I going to get my money? Am I going to get my benefits? And I think that this is one of those situations where it just shows you that if we make promises and we force people into a system, we create an expectation. And if that expectation isn't met, then we create a lot of fear and unrest in the population of people who are being affected by that. And so on some level, if we have freedom and we can inject a little bit more agency into what we're doing, if we have a negative outcome, we can at least own it because we chose into it. But in this particular case, government has to own it, or at least they should. Of course, government never owns anything. It's never government's fault. But they should own this because they're the ones who are poor stewards of people's money, and they're the ones who made the promises. They're the ones who forced people in. And so now, hey, what are you going to do? It's just fear time, man. It's time to be fearful. So, no matter how many times Trump or Musk or whomever says, hey, we saved X amount of dollars, we're going to cut X amount of dollars from the budget, we're going to make sure that we actually up your benefits, we're going to try and get rid of income tax altogether. This is all very, very scary. It's completely, antithetical and completely different to what people are used to. So it creates that space where people don't really want to sacrifice because they don't feel like they should. And to be honest with you, if you're forced into something and made promises, then the truth is you shouldn't have to. So you can't, you sort of, you can't like fault them for feeling that way. Does that make sense? I know I'm kind of rambling.
It absolutely makes sense. I mean, like the saddest part of it is probably that, whenever you're not happy with whatever the government does, whether it cuts your pension or whatever it does, if it breaks promises, you cannot do shit about it. Like you said, they are the ones owning the guns, and there's not much you can do, obviously, besides leaving the country. But it has always been this way. I mean, you got the voting right. Obviously, you can elect who you want to basically, reign the country. But in the end, and you said that before, most of the governments did not keep their promises, didn't deliver what they promised the people. So it's actually interesting to see that people are now surprised and fearful and basically almost not happy. I think who did I hear speak about it? It's probably enough people who are not satisfied with whatever Trump does, even though it looks like he's just keeping his promises, right? So I'd always like to hear the opposite side. I'd love to have someone complaining about all that stuff and someone who feels like Joe Biden would have been the better choice. Unfortunately, I don't know anyone. Probably you do, right?
I know people who think Joe Biden would have been a better choice. I don't know any rational people who think that. I mean, Joe Biden is not mentally sound. He's not all there. I mean, how could you possibly want to see someone whose mental capacities are diminished in a role of global leadership? That makes zero sense to me. And these people who are like, Trump is a Nazi and, Elon is a Nazi and they're fascists and this and that and the other thing. Like they can't even define those terms. Like they don't even know what those words mean. And yet they're out there you know, vandalizing things, and which is, it's just like it's a really, really strange time, right? Like if you can rationally articulate an argument as to why you think Trump is a fascist Nazi, okay, cool. Then I'll listen to anything that you have to say. The
Hmm.
truth is, like, whether you're far right or you're far left, you're the same person. The far right and the far left are both authoritative assholes. And, it's like the old saying goes, right? If there's a boot on your neck and you
Hmm.
can't breathe, you don't care if it's the right boot or the left boot. You just want the fucking boot off your neck. And that's how I felt under, like, Clinton, Bush, Obama, like all of them. Like, you pick one. Like, I felt that way under all of them, because at the end of the day, when they're trying to rule by authority, or govern by authority, they're basically just mandating how you're going to live. And that's no way. That's no way to govern. Like the best people in the world who can actually create agreements and win-win sort of outcomes. These are the people who don't have to govern by iron will. They don't have to force things on you, right? And so right now it's a situation that is a little bit odd, because we've had the last, like I said before, the last 3 or 4 or 5 presidents like signing executive orders like crazy. And to me, that's just governing by authority. That's why I don't necessarily prefer it. And so then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, why is this happening? And the reason it's happening is because the left and the right can't get anything done, right? There's no clear majority. So this particular last election, where there was a clear blowout, like Trump won this election in a landslide, wasn't even close. And I don't think, there were almost 0 counties, even within states, that voted left. So, at the end of the day, the clear mandate was there, and this organization and this government is like pushing forward on what people demanded be done. And I think, a lot of times when we look at that, we don't think about the consequences of action, because the consequence of real action means real change. And again, we know how much people like to change, which is not much, right? So that's kind of where it's at right now. And, my preference would be that we had such great ideas, such amazing foresight and time to put ideas to the public that people could agree on and move together on. Because I think most people want the same thing, but we're just not there yet. And the last 2 or 3 decades have proven the fact that nothing can get done absent some sort of, hey, we've got to push this idea through, so let me sign an executive order. It's really sad. I don't agree with that. But I also don't agree with staying stuck in a negative situation. So I think when we look at the situation as a whole, we have a group of people who are committed to making real change, and we have an opportunity at a second American revolution. And this is not my words. These are words from like tech entrepreneurs coming out of California who have seen firsthand, the detrimental impact of too much government, which is really strange because these people traditionally vote left, but now they've switched to, vote right, which I guess they really didn't vote right because Trump isn't really a Republican. He's just kind of like a centrist. He's more in the middle than anything. So we'll see, man. I don't really hold out a lot of hope that a lot of minds will be changed, because there's so much energy. Oh, I'm getting a call. There's so much energy around. Let's see. How do I turn this off? Oh, shoot.
Last time it was X. This time it's Telegram.
I was just rambling on, man, continuing to talk. So I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
it
I'm not
should.
sure when I'm not sure when I lost you.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. It's enough anyway. I was basically rambling on the whole, political situation. We probably beat that dead horse to death, but yeah. I mean, the point of it is, like, if we're going to make change, it's going to hurt in the short run, and that's probably really all that needs to be said. We've had decades to make change. We haven't. And no, I don't think any rational person would want government the way that it was, because it was completely ineffectual and, not doing or upholding its own rules of law. So yeah, I don't think anybody wants to go backwards who's actually thinking about the situation.
I would have loved to witness how, former presidents ran the country. When I read stuff about, for example, Ronald Reagan or Jimmy Carter, I'm actually pretty sad that I never was able, because I'm too young. You probably witnessed all that, but they seemed like pretty cool guys actually. But living back then, it's probably was probably different, right?
Yeah, it was very different. I was just a little kid. Like I was too young to, know what was going on. So I really don't know that much from that time period. So yeah, I couldn't really. I mean, I know the effects of some of the policies now, but I don't. When I put myself in my little kid shoes, like all I cared about was playing outside or riding my bike or something.
Would have loved to see you as a kid, to be honest. I love seeing people as kids for some reason. Like, I feel like if I see an adult, I can't imagine how he looked like as a kid. So if you have a little photo or something, you need to shoot it over.
I will. Yeah, most adults are just little kids. Most of us never really
Yeah,
grow up.
that's true actually.
Yeah.
That's true.
Nothing really changes, except for your body. Like your body changes, and you learn a few things. But most adults are just little kids still.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
But to be honest, last time when I went to the barber shop, my barber told me like, "Oh, it's getting a little thinner," and I was like, "No way!" I was almost crying.
Yeah, that's
So
par for the
yeah.
course, man. I can relate for sure.
Okay, so we got the U.S. politics. Let's jump a little bit into the Goodfellas. And we currently have a voting running about the next artist incubator artist who's going to take the spotlight. Right now, it's a pretty tight race between Metalhead and Liam. Both have the same amount of votes. So make sure you have 18 days left, so no pressure. Um, and then we will finally reveal who the next artist incubator artist is going to be. Before that, we have another big drop coming up, the RWA drop. If you haven't listened to the podcast we had with Jason last time, and it's not the podcast, the Spaces, make sure to check that one out. It was very interesting. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the art. Maybe you can tell us a little. I think we spoke about the art. It's not done yet, but yeah, do you think that the RWA drop we will have is going to be the beginning of something very big, RWA wise, in the Goodfellas project?
I think so. I mean, I have a lot of ideas, and I know you do as well. We've talked about this, like, what does it look like to create real value and bring value to marketplace? I mean, that's always where my mind is, and I know that's several. I know that several times we've had conversations around this. I mean, our business owner in real life. I've been a business owner in real life, investor, and all the rest of it. So we know that in order to be successful, we need to provide as much value as possible. So if we can RWA our way into like serving more people, which is really what entrepreneurship is about, then I think that that's exactly where we want to go. But it doesn't stop there, right? Like at the end of the day, if we can do raises using NFTs, like if we sell NFTs into the marketplace, we raise some money, rather than blowing that money on some also ran dev project, like all these other NFT projects are doing, we could take that money and buy something in the real world that creates cash flow or creates a return. So let's say, for example, we did a raise and we brought in, I don't know, 50 grand or 100 grand, and we turned around and we bought a small rental property. Well, you could easily turn around and cash flow that back out to your NFT holders, and that process could be automated based on the amount of revenue generated from the property itself. So in a way, you could make like a cash flow real estate investment as this example, or it could be a business, or it could be anything really that generates cash flow that creates a return for your investors, right? It's just another way of sort of investing in entrepreneurship and creating value for people. And obviously, if you buy a home, you create a rental situation, you provide a house for someone to live in, maybe to raise their kids or to build a family or to just enjoy an area, you're providing that value and they pay you in the form of rents. Those rents could be converted into payouts. Same thing with the trees, like the RWA. Like we're starting with a small batch of trees, but that could become thousands and thousands and thousands of trees, right? Like there's a there's so many different ways you can skin this cat, but the overarching theme is how do we provide value to people, either in the form of art, which is obviously the first and most paramount use of NFTs, of course, IP rights with that art, but then how can you extend it? I think it's a great question to explore and to ask. And I don't think very many people are actually looking at it, even 7, 8, 9 years into the NFT market.
Yeah, that's true, and I love the idea of like expanding that whole thing. Obviously, this now is a little test drop to see how do people take it, how do they like it, what's their perception of that whole thing. Because obviously we are first movers again, and I love that Jason on Spaces said last time that we were like the first project they reached out to in order to have such a cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we appreciate that. It's great. I mean, he said it. It's not easy to find genuine people in that space, people who actually want to build something. And I mean, we said that plenty of times as well, that when we got in touch with those guys, we immediately noticed and realized that they actually do good stuff, not just in order to create a return on investment, but also for the environment, for the nature, for animals. And I called it a win-win-win situation many times before. I love the idea. I hope that people will love it, and the possibility and the opportunity to combine it with great art is actually top notch. I love that idea, man, and I'm looking forward to that drop. It's probably one of the biggest things we had so far. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think ultimately where we want to go is, I mean, there's so many different potentialities to follow. And I feel like the more we understand the technology, the more we continue to build a positive reputation, the more we continue to really show up for people, which is, again, things that just don't happen in this marketplace, at least as far as most NFT projects are concerned. It's a cash grab and go. The more we sort of become infused inside the marketplace and the community and, the communication that we're putting out at large, the more opportunities we have to actually return value to people in so many different ways. And the trees, of course, are like the first foray into that. But as Jason was saying, on the spaces, he was talking about how difficult it is to find stand-up individuals. Like, we continue to build that reputation for standing up for what we believe in and really wanting to fight for people to create good things and be around for the long term. It only makes sense to start thinking about how we can extrapolate this into bigger and bigger and bigger things. So right now we're starting with the trees. And like I said, maybe that becomes 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000, whatever the case may be. Or maybe we do raises for cash flow situations, whatever it happens to be. But the overarching theme that I really want to just walk away from all these conversations is, how do we create win-win situations? In other words, how can we win? How can the investor win? How can our partners win? How can everybody win? And then how can we win bigger? Just like, how can we continue to win bigger over time? Like, that's really what it's about. And, I think there's a lot of unexplored avenues, to say the least, and a lot of undeveloped tech that we can dive into. As you've seen, it's not the easiest thing to do to play with these things just yet, but all of these things are coming. And I think we have an opportunity to really step into that and lean into that and to create some great things. So I feel like the excitement around that is just one of those things that, we can continue to sort of lean on as we build, because on those days when it's difficult and it's hard and all the rest of it, it's like, all right, well, remember while we're here, we're creating long-term value for real investors, for real collectors, for real curators and creators. And what else is there? Like that's purpose, that's meaning, that's meaningful in the space. And to me, that's, almost more valuable than any of the other things that could be going on in the space right now. It's like in a space where, there's so much opacity and so much negativity. If we can be a bright spot, then I think we're winning already.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Beautifully said. And yeah, so we will fully focus on the RWA drop, which is set to be on April 21st. And right after that, we will have artist incubator drops, which will come a bit more frequently than once a month. And then, obviously, I love that that Mark brought it up recently. We will have another batch, which is most likely going to be animated. And man, this is actually so much to look forward to, and I couldn't be more excited, man.
Yeah, me too. I'm really stoked for the animation and the HTML stuff because there's a lot of really cool things we can do there. So yeah, I definitely want to talk to his animator friend. I mean, we've got some ideas on how we can execute it as well, but yeah, that's going to be super cool. So we've got the faces drop, we've got an animated drop, and we've got an HTML based drop to focus on and to work on. So those are going to be the three next,
Yeah.
pieces to the first era puzzle that'll take us to 1,000 pieces. And then from there, we'll go into the second era and we'll obviously create a lot more new and cool stuff there.
Absolutely, man. So, for my final words, I would like to give a little shout out to Finder Found, who bought another boss yesterday, and a special shout out to Mark actually because he um, is obviously listening to the podcast, and I just wanted to yeah, show him some appreciation for being there all the time, for being on Spaces. This is awesome. I think we covered it all for today, right?
Yeah, 100%, man. And, we've definitely run the gamut, probably spent way too much time talking about what's happening in politics, but obviously that impacts what's happening in the marketplace. So it pays to pay attention to that sort of stuff. So, sorry if we bored everybody with the political nonsense, but at the end of the day, like we have to pay attention. That's what it's about. It's not about choosing sides or any of that kind of nonsense. I want everybody to win. I'm win-win always. And so when we see people like Mark show up, Mr. White Chocolate himself, promoting what's going on, telling people to listen to the podcast, listening to the podcast, it's really cool to see that happening. I mean, to get the education out to the marketplace, to have him trust us enough to invite people to take a listen. I mean, that's a huge, huge compliment. People like STC in the marketplace, like really out there supporting artists and being, a really high quality collector of beautiful things. So many great things, so many great people have come into our lives in this space. And, I couldn't be more grateful. And I know you feel the same way. So much love to all you guys out there, artists, creators. We love you all. And we're going to continue to support you with everything that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree. It was a little bit or a lot of U.S. politics today, but little alpha for you guys. Whenever Jason and I, when we have team meetings, we always lose ourselves in different topics. So this is the way we speak with each other, and this is how it should be, I think, because obviously crypto space is great. U.S. politics is always somehow connected to it. NFTs obviously connected to crypto. So yeah, I hope you still enjoyed it. I hope you guys will have a great week. We look forward to Spaces on Friday. We will have the RWA drop promoted, obviously, now. Get your vote out for the Artist Incubator voting. And this should be it. Have a great one. See you guys next week. Bye bye.
Take care, guys. See you next time.